I used to think I knew what love was. I used to believe that family meant safety. That the people who raised you, the ones who shared your blood, could never hurt you. Never betray you. Never destroy you. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on my 18th birthday. 18. That was supposed to mean freedom. A fresh start. The world at my feet. Instead, 18 became the night I lost everything. That night changed everything. The way I see love. The way I see trust. The way I see myself. People talk about betrayal like it's something that comes from the outside. A friend. A stranger. Someone distant. But what happens when the person who betrays you is the one who's supposed to protect you? Some betrayals come from the people you least expect, and some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. I wish I could go back. I wish I could unsee, unfeel, undo. But I can't. And now, I have to live with it. What have I done? Before we begin, I want to warn you that this story contains mature themes. It explores love, trust, and the moments that break us. It deals with manipulation, power, and the kind of wounds that don't always leave bruises, but never really heal. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop watching now. But if you stay, I promise you, this story will make you think. It will make you feel. And it might just change the way you look at the people around you. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who we were before it. Before the lines blurred. Before everything changed. My name is Layla Arnold. I had just turned 18. I was smart. People always said that about me. Smart, curious, maybe a little too naive for my own good. I liked to believe the best in people. I liked to believe that love, real love, meant safety. Meant trust. Meant knowing, without a doubt, that someone would always be there for you. And for as long as I could remember, that person was Cameron. Cameron Arnold was my older brother. 24. 6 years older, but somehow, it never felt like that much. He was confident, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone turn their head. Charming. Easy to like. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when he was talking to you. Like you mattered. To me, he was more than just an older brother. He was my protector. My constant. When I was a kid, and the world felt too loud, too overwhelming, he was the one who made it feel small again. Safe again. If I was scared, he was there. If I was hurt, he was the one who dried my tears. I worshipped him in the way little sisters do. I looked up to him. Hung on his every word. He was my hero. But looking back, I wonder if he always knew that. I wonder if he liked it too much. Our parents, Rebecca and Preston, were good people. Or at least, they tried to be. They loved us, in their own way. But love doesn't always mean presence. And they weren't always present. My mother, Rebecca, was the kind of woman who was always doing too much. Always planning, always moving. She loved control. Needed it. If she could keep herself busy, then maybe she wouldn't have to deal with the things she didn't want to face. Like my father. Preston Arnold. A good man, when he wanted to be. But distracted. Work was always more important. His career. His ambitions. I think, in his own way, he thought that providing for us was the same as being there for us. But it wasn't. Not really. Our family was close-knit, at least on the outside. We had dinner together. We celebrated birthdays, holidays. Smiled for the pictures. But there were cracks. And sometimes, the cracks were big enough to let things slip through. Cameron was the one who filled in the gaps. He took care of me when they weren't looking. Taught me how to ride a bike, how to swim. He was the one who tucked me in at night when Mom was too tired, when Dad was still at work. I never questioned it. It was just how it was. It was always Cameron. But even then, there were moments. Little things. Looks that lasted too long. Touches that lingered just a second more than they should have. Things that, at the time, I didn't think twice about. But now, looking back, I wonder how long this had been happening. How long he had been waiting. There was one person who saw it before I did. Monica Matthews. My best friend. Monica was everything I wasn't. Bold. Sharp. Unapologetic. She never cared what people thought of her. Never second-guessed herself. She was the kind of person who could see through people. And she saw through Cameron. I remember the first time she ever said something about it. We were 13. Sitting in my room, painting our nails, talking about boys, the way girls do. She said it so casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Your brother is obsessed with you. I laughed. Told her she was crazy. Told her Cameron was just Cameron. Protective. Overbearing, maybe. But not like that. She just raised an eyebrow. Shrugged. You don't see it now. But you will. I should have listened to her. I should have seen it. Looking back, I wonder how much of it was real. If the love I thought we had was ever love at all. Or if it was always something else. Something darker. Something I wasn't ready to see. But by the time I realized the truth, it was too late. There are moments in life that don't seem important when they happen. Just passing conversations, throwaway jokes. But later, when you look back, you realize they were warnings. Signs you ignored. Clues to something much bigger. Much darker. I should have known that night wasn't normal. But I didn't. Not yet. Cameron's 18th birthday. I was 12. He had just become an adult, and I was still just a kid in his eyes. At least, that's what I thought. The party had ended hours ago. Mom and Dad had gone to bed. The house was quiet except for the hum of the television in his room. I had snuck in like I always did, curling up on the end of his bed, stealing the last slice of his birthday cake. He was staring at the ceiling, hands behind his head, lost in thought. You know I've never been with anyone, right? The words came out of nowhere. I remember laughing, because why was he telling me this? I was 12. What did I know about that? Yeah, right, I had teased, licking frosting off my fingers. Like you're some kind of saint. He turned his head toward me, serious. I haven't. I swear. I rolled my eyes. Well, if you're still waiting, it must be for someone special, right? He smirked. A lazy, knowing smile. Or maybe I'm just waiting for the right moment. I didn't know what to say to that. But before I could change the subject, he leaned in a little closer. Tell you what. If you're still a virgin when you turn 18, we'll take care of each other. The words made me pause. Just for a second. But then I laughed, shoving his shoulder. You're disgusting, I said, shaking my head. That's not funny. But he didn't laugh. He just kept looking at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Deal? I rolled my eyes again, waving him off. Whatever, Cameron. It was just a joke. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed for years. Until my 18th birthday. The day started like any other. Mom was running around, trying to make everything perfect. Dad was on a work call, barely paying attention. Monica showed up early, already talking about how I needed to make this birthday count. You're legal now, she kept saying. This is the beginning of your real life. But from the moment I woke up, something felt wrong. It was Cameron. He wasn't acting normal. Or maybe he was, and I was only just now seeing it for what it was. The way his eyes lingered too long. The way he stood just a little too close. It wasn't just brotherly affection. It was something else. At first, I ignored it. Pushed it to the back of my mind. But Monica noticed. We were getting ready in my room, trying on dresses, fixing our hair. She caught him watching me from the hallway. The way his lips parted slightly, the way his gaze moved over me, slow and deliberate. Monica frowned. "Girl, why is your brother looking at you like that?" I glanced at Cameron, then back at her, laughing it off. "He's not. Layla. He's literally staring at you like a guy at a bar about to make a move." I shook my head. "You're imagining things." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her face. But she let it go. For now. Dinner was worse. The whole family was there. Mom had set the table with candles, dimmed the lights like it was some fancy event. The air felt thick, heavy, like something was pressing down on me. Cameron sat across from me. And he wouldn't stop looking. I tried to focus on my plate. On the conversation. But every time I glanced up, his eyes were there. Watching me. Studying me. Every time I moved, every time I spoke, every time I took a sip of my drink, he was tracking it. And when no one else was looking. A wink. A slow, deliberate lick of his lips. My stomach twisted. I didn't know why, but I suddenly felt exposed, like my skin wasn't my own anymore. Like I wasn't just sitting at a table with my family, I was being hunted. Then he leaned forward, his voice lower than usual. "Happy birthday, Layla." The way he said it made something shiver down my spine. The way his fingers curled around his glass, the way he smirked just enough for only me to see. Like it was some kind of secret. I swallowed hard. Forced a smile. Pretended like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. After dinner, I had my first legal drink. Just a glass of wine, nothing crazy. But it made my head light, made the world feel just a little softer around the edges. And for a moment, I let myself breathe. But that moment didn't last. Because later that night, when I went back to my room, I found something waiting for me. A small piece of paper, slipped under my door. 6 words. No explanation. No signature. But I knew exactly who it was from. "Come to my room when they're asleep." The note sat there for hours. I didn't touch it. Didn't move it. But I couldn't stop staring at it. 6 words. 6 stupid little words. And yet, they had a weight I couldn't explain. Heavy. Suffocating. "Come to my room when they're asleep." I should have torn it up. I should have thrown it away, pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. I left it right there, in the center of my desk, like it was daring me to make a choice. The house was quiet now. Mom and Dad had gone to bed. Monica had left hours ago, giving me one last look before she walked out the door, one of those looks, the kind that said she knew something wasn't right but didn't know how to say it out loud. I could still hear her voice in my head. "Your brother is obsessed with you." I had laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that note. 10 minutes? An hour? My mind kept circling the same thought over and over again. I don't have to go. No one is making me do this. But my body told a different story. Because before I even realized what I was doing, I was standing. I was walking to my door. I was stepping into the hallway. I didn't even put on shoes. Just a robe over my pajamas. Bare feet against cold wood, silent, careful. The way you move when you don't want to wake anyone up. The way you move when you know, deep down, you're about to do something you can never undo. His door was only a few feet away. I could see the light spilling out from underneath it, flickering, like candlelight. My heartbeat was so loud I thought it might wake the whole house. I stood there. Just stood there. Frozen. If I walk away now, nothing changes. If I open that door, everything does. I don't know how long I hesitated. But eventually, my hand moved on its own. Knuckles against wood. A quiet knock. A pause. Then, "Come in." The first thing I noticed was the smell. Warm. Familiar. The scent of the candles mixing with his cologne, something sharp and clean, something I had smelled 1,000 times before but never like this. The second thing I noticed was him. He was lying on his bed. Not under the blankets, just sprawled out like he was waiting for me. And he wasn't wearing a shirt. Just his boxers, low on his hips. His skin caught the candlelight, muscles shifting as he propped himself up on his elbows. My mouth went dry. My stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. This wasn't how brothers were supposed to be. And yet, I couldn't look away. What the hell was that at dinner? The words came out sharp, accusing, breaking the thick, suffocating silence between us. I needed to break it. I needed to make this feel normal again. Make him laugh, make him roll his eyes, make him say something that reminded me this was all in my head. But he didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He just stared at me, expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he sat up, his movements lazy, controlled. The way a predator moves when it knows it has all the time in the world. "You really don't remember, do you?" My brows furrowed. "Remember what?" His lips curved. Not a smile. Something else. Our deal. And just like that, the memory hit me like a fist to the stomach. 12 years old. Sitting on his bed, stealing his cake. The way his voice had dropped when he said it. "If you're still a virgin when you turn 18, we'll take care of each other." It had been a joke. It had to have been a joke. My breath came out unsteady, too quick. That was years ago. And? That was a joke, Cameron. He tilted his head, studying me. Was it? I forced out a laugh. The kind that didn't sound real, that didn't sound like me. Obviously. Do you really think I took that seriously? I did. My stomach dropped. He stood up. Slow. Deliberate. The candlelight flickered against his skin as he took one step closer. Then another. The space between us was shrinking. My pulse was deafening in my ears. "You're my brother." My voice came out weaker than I wanted. "This isn't. We can't." He didn't stop walking. Didn't stop looking at me like I was something to be owned, something he had been waiting for. "You were always mine, Layla. You just didn't know it yet." I should have left. I should have turned around and walked out of that room and never looked back. But I didn't. Because there was a part of me, deep down, buried beneath years of admiration and trust, that had been waiting, too. And that was the most terrifying realization of all. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to leave. To turn around, walk out, shut the door behind me, and pretend none of this ever happened. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood there, frozen, as Cameron closed the space between us. Step by step. Slow. Patient. Like he had all the time in the world. My mind was still catching up, still trying to piece together what was happening. It didn't make sense. This wasn't him. This wasn't my brother. My brother was my protector, my constant. He was safe. He wasn't. This. He wasn't looking at me like this. His eyes roamed over me, dark and steady, unblinking. Not the way a brother looks at a sister. Not the way family is supposed to look at each other. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. I should go. The words barely made it out. They didn't sound strong. They didn't sound like a decision. They sounded like a question. Cameron smirked, tilting his head just slightly. Like he had already won. Like he knew something I didn't. "You could," he said, voice calm. "But you won't." Something inside me twisted. A deep, pulling sensation in my stomach, in my chest, like I was on the edge of something I didn't understand. I took a step back. A small one. Just enough to feel like I had some control, like I was making a choice. And if I say no? His expression changed. The smirk faded. His jaw tightened just slightly. His hands, which had been hanging loose at his sides, curled into fists for half a second before relaxing again. It was subtle. So subtle I almost missed it. Then he smiled. Not his usual smile. Something smaller. Sharper. Then you don't trust me. I sucked in a breath, caught off guard by the weight of his words. It was a simple sentence. But it wasn't simple at all. He knew exactly what he was doing. Cameron had always been good with words. Always knew how to twist things just right, how to make you question yourself. And now, he was using that skill on me. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. I had always trusted him. For as long as I could remember, he had been the one person I never doubted. But this wasn't trust. This was something else. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward, and there was no going back. You were always special to me, Layla. His voice was softer now. Lower. Almost gentle. Always mine. No one else deserves you. The words sank into me, threading through years of memories, of childhood laughter, of whispered conversations in the dark. Of looking up to him, of believing in him. Of needing him. I hated how much I wanted to believe him now. I hated how much a part of me did. My body felt heavy, weighed down by something I couldn't name. I wanted to scream, to shake myself out of it, to run, to do anything but just stand there. But I stayed. Cameron took another step forward. We were close now. Too close. My breath hitched in my throat. His scent was familiar, soap and skin and something warm, something safe. Or at least, it used to be safe. You want this, he murmured. You always have. My stomach flipped. My heartbeat stuttered. That's not true. But my voice wavered. He reached out, slow and careful, and brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. My skin burned where his fingers touched. Then tell me to stop. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. His eyes searched mine, patient, waiting. Daring me to pull away. I should have said it. I should have screamed it. But I didn't. His hand trailed down, skimming over my jaw, down my arm. My whole body tensed, heat crawling up my spine. I took another step back. His fingers wrapped around my wrist before I could move further. A whisper, so quiet I barely heard it. Just stay. My breath came out in a shudder. And then? Silence. Everything stopped. Morning came too fast. The first thing I noticed was the light. Pale, early morning light filtering through my curtains, touching everything like it was supposed to mean something. Like it was supposed to cleanse. But it didn't. It only made the room feel smaller. Colder. The second thing I noticed was the weight. Heavy. Pressing down on my chest, on my skin, like I had woken up covered in something I couldn't wash off. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my throat dry. My robe was still wrapped around me, slightly open at the collar. My fingers clenched the fabric, pulling it tighter. Covering myself, even though I was alone. Alone. The word clung to me. Because that's what I felt. Not loved. Not special. Not wanted. Just, alone. I turned my head. The mirror across the room reflected a stranger. My hair was messy, tangled. My lips were swollen, slightly parted like I had been gasping for air in my sleep. But it was my eyes that scared me the most. They looked empty. I leaned closer. Studied myself, the sharp lines of my face, the way my skin seemed thinner somehow, stretched too tight over the bones beneath it. Who was I now? I had always been so sure of myself. So sure of who I was, of what was right and what was wrong. But that girl, the girl I used to be, was gone. And I didn't know if I'd ever get her back. Monica showed up that afternoon. I almost didn't answer the door. Almost let her knocks go unheard, let her texts pile up unanswered. But eventually, I forced myself to act normal. The second I opened the door, she frowned. You okay? My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I forced a smile, quick, easy, practiced. Yeah. She didn't buy it. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her eyes ran over me, slow, assessing. You look like you haven't slept. I shrugged, turning away before she could see too much. Just tired. It was a long night. Uh-huh. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in her voice. And I should have known she wouldn't let it go. Where were you last night? I froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. Monica was sharp. She caught it. Layla. I forced myself to keep moving, to act normal. Walked over to my bed, sat down, started picking at the hem of my sleeve. Nowhere. Just here. Liar. I swallowed hard. My mouth tasted stale, bitter. Why would I lie? Monica crossed her arms. Because you're acting weird. And because Cameron's been acting weird, too. My stomach clenched. What does that mean? I asked, too quickly. She raised an eyebrow. I saw him this morning. My hands fisted in my lap. And he was fine. Normal. Happy, even. The words knocked the breath out of me. Normal. Happy. Like nothing had happened. Like nothing had changed. But I had changed. I felt it in every part of me. In the way my skin didn't feel like mine anymore, in the way my mind wouldn't stop replaying every second of last night, over and over, twisting it, breaking it down, making me question everything. But Cameron? He was fine. He had moved on. Because to him, this wasn't something to carry. It wasn't something that sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. And that's when I realized. This wasn't the first time. He had done this before. And he would do it again. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my hands, feeling like my own body was a crime scene. Monica sat beside me, silent. She didn't push. Didn't ask any more questions. But she didn't leave either. And for that, I was grateful. Because in that moment, I didn't need words. I just needed not to be alone. Some betrayals don't come from strangers. Some nightmares start at home. It's been weeks now. Maybe months. Time feels strange, stretched thin, like it doesn't belong to me anymore. Some days, I wake up and I almost feel normal. And then I remember. And the weight comes crashing back down. I try not to think about that night. But it lives inside me. Buried in the quiet moments, in the spaces between my thoughts, in the silence before I fall asleep. It waits. Patient. Unmoving. And no matter how much I try to push it away, it's still there. Because the truth is, I don't know what happened. Not really. Not in the way that makes sense, not in the way that has clear lines, clear answers, clear blame. I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times. The words. The touches. The way he looked at me. The way I didn't stop him. The way my body felt like it wasn't my own. And I keep coming back to the same question. Was I a victim? Or was I complicit? Because I didn't say no. Not the way I should have. Not the way I know I was supposed to. But I didn't say yes either. So what does that make me? The worst part? I still don't know if I wanted it, or if I was just too scared to say no. Cameron acts like nothing happened. Like nothing ever changed between us. He still smiles the same way. He still ruffles my hair when he walks past me, still leans too close, still watches me when he thinks I'm not looking. But I see it now. I see it in the way he carries himself, in the ease of his movements, in the way he sleeps at night without tossing, without turning. He's done this before. And he'll do it again. And me? I'm just another secret he knows I won't tell. Some people say you can't help who you love. That love is messy, complicated, uncontrollable. But sometimes, love isn't love at all. Sometimes, it's something else. Something darker. Something that doesn't have a name. And once it touches you, once it stains you, you're never really clean again. You just learn to live with it. Because what else can you do? If you've made it this far, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever questioned love? Have you ever looked at someone you trusted and seen something else staring back? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you question the things we choose to ignore, then share it. Subscribe. Because some stories need to be told. Even the ones we wish weren't true. Especially those.